Give us a second here. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to today's... Oh, 1 second. I'll just give people a chance to get on. Good afternoon and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Today is February 10th, Wednesday, and it is the 28th day of Shavat. Tomorrow being the day before Rosh Chodesh, and tomorrow we'll just talk about the month of Adar and the upcoming Torah reading of the week. There was once this rabbi of a community who wasn't that busy, spent some time learning, but nobody from the community paid much attention to him. And therefore he was sitting and he felt as he wasn't accomplishing anything. He decided to move and relocate himself closer to his children and to move away. When he let the community and the board know about his decision, they came to him and they asked him, why did the rabbi decide to move? And the rabbi responds, because this was the first question I've ever gotten from anybody in the community. We know that religious people, especially Hasidim more particularly, always ask a rabbi, ask the Rebbe for advice before doing anything monumental in life. Whether it was buying a new home, whether it was getting married, doing a medical procedure. And until today, many big questions in life, many religious people ask a rabbi their advice, suggestion, idea, and many of them will follow blindly, so to speak, to what the rabbi suggests and advises. And of course, today there's a very big debate with vaccinations, where some rabbis are for it, some rabbis are against it. And same in every situation, there are some rabbis for anything, particular thing when it comes to voting. There are rabbis to vote for the right, to vote for the left, to vote for the middle, not to vote at all. And in any given topic, there's a difference and a disagreements, with two Jews, three opinions, between even the rabbis themselves. But you find that different particular groups will follow the advice that is given from their particular rabbi. And they will follow exactly what the rabbi says, whether they agree with it or disagree with it. But the moment the rabbi suggests that this should be done, this will become the mantra, the doctrine of what these people follow. And the question for it is why? Since when is a rabbi a doctor? Since when is a rabbi a politician? Since when is a rabbi any type of a business investor? Why are people coming to ask the rabbi for advice? There's actually an interesting story where a fellow once came to the previous Rebbe and asked him if he should invest in a certain portfolio. And after the previous Rebbe gives him his advice, then the previous Rebbe starts to suggest him about more observances in Torah and Judaism, where he then tells the previous Rebbe, I got my things, what I do, what I don't do, and so on. To which the previous Rebbe asked him this exact question. He says, I don't understand. I'm not a hedge fund advisor or a financial analyst, and you came to ask me which stock portfolio you should buy, and you were ready to listen. My expertise is Torah and mitzvahs, and that you're not ready to listen to. So how does it work out? What is it that people seek in a rabbi for advice, and where do we find this? The first place we actually find documented in the Bible, actually in the prophets, where somebody asked a prophet or the rabbi at the time for seemingly petty advice, was King Saul went to look for the donkeys that his father lost for about 3 months, and they didn't know what to do. They couldn't find them. And one of his people there advised him that he go ask Shmuel the prophet, Samuel the prophet, to maybe some help where he can find the donkeys. And he eventually went to Samuel the prophet, and Samuel the prophet told him the donkeys are okay where they can be found, but he had a bigger message for him, which was that he was going to be the king of the Jewish people, the first king that the Jewish people will have. He went to look for donkeys and he found the kingdom. But what we see over here is that they came to ask Samuel the prophet Not a halachic question, not a Talmudic question, not a question of Jewish law, but a very simple, practical question: where can I find my donkeys? And it seems legitimate enough that it's even documented in the Book of Prophets, Samuel 1. Taking this a step further, we find in Jewish law, it's brought in ethics of our fathers, that a person should make for himself a rabbi. The Talmud of Jewish law says, acquire for yourself a friend, make for yourself a rabbi, and judge every person favorably. It is not just talking about in Jewish thought. It is not only saying that you should have a rabbi accessible that you can ask him questions when it comes pertaining to Jewish law. You have a question for a rabbi. This should always be something that you should always be able to speak to a rabbi. I just want to mention that I didn't mention in the beginning of the class. I just want to mention that today's class is dedicated in memory of Chava Basal Yokim HaKohen, and may she be a good better and may her neshama have an aliyah and be a blessing for her family. So back to our discussion. Why then is it that we should ask a rabbi in all these details? If it's not of Jewish law, why are we asking a rabbi? Though Samuel was a prophet, but we even find this even when it doesn't come to a prophet, even when it comes to scholars. And we find that scholars in a way are even greater than prophets, as the Talmud says. So what is it? When we go in to look into this week's Torah reading, we see something very unique. Because after the Torah tells us about the laws of the Jewish people, the Torah tells us where Moses comes up onto Mount Sinai. And God is going to teach him the Torah before he brings it back down to this world. Next week's Torah reading, in a few weeks, we read about when he brings down the actual 2 tablets and he sees the Jewish people sitting with the golden calf. But this week is prior to that discussion, where the Jewish people readily accept and say, we will do and we will hear everything God tells us to do. And when he comes up to God to get the Torah, the Talmud tells us an interesting discussion, that the angels protested that the Torah come down on this world. What was the angel's problem? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob already studied the Torah. Abraham made sure that the angels wouldn't eat milk and meat together. Jacob already put tefillin. We know their observances. Abraham had circumcision. What was the angel's problem? Not only that, what were the angels worried about? Why can't the Torah be studied on high and also be taken down into this world? What was their issue with the Jewish people having the Torah that they protested on high, that asking God, why are you giving the Torah to human beings of flesh and blood? And over here comes the understanding and a concept that we've discussed many times with what the Torah's accomplishment was. When God gave the Jewish people the Torah, it wasn't just a message that he gave to the Jewish people. It wasn't just a wisdom that he gave the Jewish people. He gave the people the ability to transform the world. When God gave the Jewish people the Torah, he gave the Jewish people the access to use the Torah to transform physical into spiritual. For example, when the Jewish people decided that the 15th day of the month, that the month is the first day, so 15 days later is Passover, that day became holy. And God says this is the day you have to celebrate Passover. The setting of the Jewish calendar was dependent on the sages. God said on the 15th of the month, but who decided when the 15th of the month was? It was when the Jewish people saw the new moon and the witnesses came, and the rabbis then said, this is the 15th of the month. That means that God gave the ability when the Torah was given to Moses, that we, the Jewish people, can determine the facts on the ground of the world, that the Torah can be used to transform and transmit physicality into spirituality, making this world a spiritual place, using those physical things. This is what the angels protested. This is what the angels were against. The angels were against the fact of allowing a spiritual entity of Torah to determine and measure the facts of this world. They wanted the Torah to be absolute spiritual. They wanted it to be absolute their domain, not our domain. When God tells the Jewish people to build a tabernacle, as we're going to read in next week's Torah reading. God was telling them, you have the ability to create a confine, to make a home for godliness. You have the ability to take gold and make it holy, to take a day and make it a holiday, a holy day. This was in opposition to what the Jewish people were, what the angels were about. Take it even a step further. There's a story told. The current president of Israel, his name is Reuven Rivlin. His great-great-grandfather was first from the great students of the Vilna Gaon, which was the great sage of Lithuania, great opponent of Hasidim, but his grandson became a Hasid and a student of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe. And he eventually immigrated to the land of Israel. But the story is why. He had a terrible illness with his liver and his kidneys. And the doctors told him he has 6 months left to live. He came to the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, and he asked him what he wants to do. He wants to spend his time basking in the holiness and the aura of the Tzemach Tzedek. The third Chabad Rebbe told him, don't spend your time here. Go to the land of Israel, and you'll survive, and you'll be okay. He looked at him in amazement, and he said, why? He says, because your particular issue that you have is a dilemma, is a debate between two halachic figures. The Ashkenazic rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Isserelish, who his domain was in Russia, Lithuania, Galicia, and between Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who lived in Safat. Rabbi Yosef Cairo says that this is a healthy sign of an animal. Or Moshe Isserelish says this is considered a non-healthy sign of an animal. Being that the land of Israel is under the domain of Rabbi Yosef Cairo, therefore, the ruling will be according to him, and you will be under his ruling, and you will survive. He traveled to Israel. He lived there another 20 years. What is he saying? What does the story bring out? It's not just a miracle wonder. But what the Tzemach Tzedek was saying is that the Torah, God has given us within the Torah the power to determine and to make a difference in the world. And that affects our spiritual life as well. Many times people have come to the Rebbe and asked for a blessing for health, for wealth, financial reasons, a variety of things. And a lot of times the answer was exactly the same. Check your tefillin and mezuzahs. Do another mitzvah. Because when the Torah was given to the Jewish people and God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, he didn't just give us the ability to study a wisdom which is infinite, but he also gave us a mechanism of how we can strengthen our Wi-Fi, our connection to God. And when we strengthen our connection to God, it doesn't only affect our spiritual connection, it also affects our physical connection. Which takes us back to our original question. Why ask a rabbi anything? Because the rabbi sees something. Not because he's a financial advisor, not because he's a medical doctor, and not because he knows what's going on in your mind or sees the future. Because the rabbi we hope that you ask is one who has studied Torah and tells you things from a Torah perspective, from a spiritual perspective, with when followed, will have an effect on your life, will change your life from a spiritual effect and ultimately change your material effect as well. Because they're interrelated, interconnected. The Torah governs our life, creates a physical understanding and appreciation of what the world is. Now, of course, there are some rabbis and there are some rabbis. We have to make sure that one is based on Torah values and understood and appreciated according to Torah values. As well as, there are some doctors and some doctors, some lawyers and some lawyers. Everything has its variety. We need to know where we ask and what to ask. And at the same time, we shouldn't go rabbi hopping. We should be able to choose and see one person that make as our mentor, as our guide, that they will be able to direct us in creating a spiritual space within the physical world, changing the way we live, think, and understand. So if there's one thing that we can take away from today, is find a mentor, make a guide, find a rabbi that can advise you and guide you in what you do in life and how to create a spiritual oasis which will forever change your materialistic life. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to sharing with you again tomorrow at Lunch Break with the Rabbi at 1 p.m. Again, today's class was dedicated to the memory of Chava Basal Yokem HaKohen. May your memory be a blessing for her children and family, great-grandchildren, grandchildren, and only continue to shine for now and forever. All the best. Have a great day.